Tennessee football is in the spotlight as the spring transfer portal opens. The Vols need a new quarterback with Nico Iamaleava hitting the transfer portal after the situation came to a head right before Tennessee's spring game. Welcome into SEC Football Unfiltered, our podcast from the USA Today Network. I'm Blake Toppmeyer, pleased to be joined today by Wes Rucker. Wes Rucker is a senior writer for 24/7 Sports and Go Vols 247.com. Wes has been covering Tennessee for many, many years, has no shortage of opinions. And when I thought to myself, who might have some opinions on this situation going on at Tennessee with Nico, Wes, my mind immediately went to you. I mean that as a compliment.
Well, that's good. Normally it's sometimes I'm thought of maybe in a bad way, but no, I think, yeah, I mean, it's you never say never in this business. Like I say, I rarely say never, basically. And I can't say that I thought it would come to this, but it did. So, let's talk about it.
Let's do it. You got a couple columns up over at GoVols247.com if people want to check those out, and we'll get into it here. So kind of rewinding before we go forward, Wes, and we should note all this is subject to change. The transfer portal is very, very fluid. Things may change by the time you listen to this podcast, but let's wind as before we go forward. So, it was not the greatest mystery in the world that Nico behind the scenes was kind of trying to sweeten the NIL pot a little bit, but then On3 comes out with the report on Thursday, sort of bringing the situation out into the public that he's negotiating for a better NIL deal from Tennessee. He was already set to make more than $2 million this year in NIL, according to reports. Was seeking a deal for the $4 million ballpark. But then things really came to a head on Friday, right? Nico doesn't show up to practice, and that's when I think we know the situation is getting real. Like, as you see it, what was sort of the fork in the road moment for Tennessee where it went from like, okay, this is an active situation, we got something bubbling up here with our starting quarterback, to heading down the path of where Nico and Tennessee were not going to be in harmony, be in union anymore?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of flashpoints in there. One is I think it's pretty clear that Tennessee made the decision to get that news out there, right? And so I think a lot of the discussions have been about what things have happened from Nico's side and his family side. And I do think one thing that maybe gets lost in that is that this was, for the most part, staying behind the scenes, or at least behind the scenes enough to where like all of us knew it, but did not have it enough maybe to source it to go with the story on it. And that obviously changed when something from Tennessee's side leaked it to Pete, who, credit to him, got the news first and put it out there. And that was kind of a big moment, because I don't think that happens unless Tennessee's starting to feel like this is not going to fix the situation. Like, and I think maybe that's a Hail Mary from them to kind of change the story or change the narrative to either get Nico's side on board or to kind of start the PR war, on the high ground. And hey, that's life, I guess. But and then when you immediately saw how Nico's side reacted to that, which was about as badly as you can react to anything, if we're being honest. I mean, to come out and not just deny it with something that's not true, but then also go attack the reporter,
Right.
which, that's a time-tested way to score points, right?
Mm-hmm.
You find a media reporter or the media in general, you go at us, and hey, we're an easy target. People don't naturally love us sometimes, so that makes sense in some ways, right? But not maybe when it's a blatant lie that could be easily disproved. Maybe don't do it then in that situation. But then that happened, and then Friday, that was all Thursday night, and then Friday morning, things go from Nico's with the quarterbacks, at Joey Halsley's house eating tacos on Thursday night. Everybody's got smiles on their faces. Everybody's having a great time. Nobody's talking about problems. And then Friday morning, he's just not at practice. And not only is he not at practice, which is very unusual for him, He's not a guy who's just not there. He doesn't show up late. He doesn't miss things. He puts in the work. He's not there. And then they can't get a hold of him. So very clearly he's not there intentionally. And, and so when that happens, Josh Heupel and some of his senior council, basically, or leadership council, basically got together and said, this is it. We're regardless of what happened before, we're done with this now. So it can happen that quick when you're QB1. You can't just not show up and have people not know where you are. Like,
Right.
you know what I'm saying, Blake? Like, you've been around the game, that if you're a defensive tackle or a corner or a receiver or running back, pretty much any other position you're doing that. It's weird, but you can move past it. You can get on the same page eventually. Quarterback can't do it.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is, like, most of us have been through negotiations before, where maybe you're trying to get a raise from your employer, and conversations are ongoing. Maybe you're hoping from an outside offer to increase your leverage that you have on your current employer. But the one thing that, if you do this, you're pretty much done with your current employer, is if you stop showing up to work while those negotiations are ongoing. Well, that pretty much is going to end things with your current employer. And maybe Nico well knew that. I mean, I would think he's a smart enough guy. He has to know on some level, if he doesn't show up to work on Friday, it's probably, isn't going to be great with me and my current employer. Or do you think he didn't know that? Do you think he could have said, I'm not going to show up to work on Friday, not show up to practice, and things will still be hunky dory? We might be able to hammer something out here.
I don't think when they went about it this way, and I say they because ultimately Nico's doing what his father tells him to do. I mean,
yeah. From here forward, all Nico references will be Team Nico.
Because and I don't want to exonerate the young man from any blame here whatsoever, but I think it's important for everybody to remember that a 20-year-old is legally an adult. It's not a fully formed adult. You're not a fully formed human then at that point. You don't know your place in the world. You don't know, and your parents at that point, what they say goes. Like, I think that's one thing that's lost in this whole story is, at the end of the day, Nico, the only chance he had to save face publicly in this was to throw his dad under a bus in front of millions of people. And I don't know a lot of 20-year-olds that are willing to do that. And I'm not judging, because if you're able to do it, good for you. I couldn't do it at that age. No way. No way could I do that. So I think we got to try to remember these things. But I think this is such uncharted territory for college football that they maybe honestly didn't know exactly how it would go. I think maybe they thought, you know what? We're mad at Tennessee for leaking this stuff. They've taken this public. So they're the ones who made this public, not us. And now we'll give them a taste back by not going to practice. And the day before the spring game, put some pressure on them. That way the public's going to say, oh, no, you got to pay him, whatever it takes. And I think they obviously badly misplayed it. But I don't think by doing that, they thought this is 100% done with Tennessee, because they knew they didn't have any great offers at the time anyway. Like, they knew that they didn't have at least an offer on the table for that much money at a place like Tennessee. I think they knew they didn't have that. And they do, because I think they would have known, they would have wanted Tennessee to know that, because they would have wanted to negotiate the money up. So I think they probably thought, well, let's just give them a taste of their own medicine here, and just badly misplayed it.
Yeah, I think that is one thing that's undeniable in this situation, is that Team Nico, the Nico camp, probably overplayed their hand, and this was not a case of negotiating 101 here. Certainly not 200, 300 levels of contract negotiation. This failed to meet the bar of
don't mix money and family. Don't mix money and family.
Well said. Yeah. So moving forward now, before we get to the situation at Tennessee, and as we say, it's a fluid market out there, fluid situation. But as we look at Nico and his prospects going forward, I think there's like this urge from Tennessee fans, which is natural, right, to think like, this guy's toast, his career's over, he's going to wither away in the transfer portal, and we'll never hear nor see of him again. And we're hearing some coaches out there basically kind of flex a little bit and say, we're not going to stand for this type of stuff. However, this was a former 5-star recruit in the 24/7 Sports recruiting rankings.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in the transfer rankings as it stands right now, he's the #1 ranked quarterback prospect out there, maybe the #1 ranked prospect, period. This is a talented young man who had a bit of an up and down first season as Tennessee's starter, but you could still see the flashes of ability that made him a 5-star recruit. And at the end of the day, he was playing in the playoffs, right? There were a lot of other factors around him, including Tennessee's defense, that allowed them to get to the playoffs. But this was a playoff quarterback last year. And so what do you think the market for him will be like, knowing, okay, maybe he's got a pretty steep asking price here. A lot of programs probably have figured out their quarterback situation, but we also know this guy's got some ability.
Yeah, I think the way I've described it is, again, I rarely say never. I would be very surprised if he ends up with a raise and B, an overall better situation or more team like talent around him. I think at the end of the day, yes, he was a playoff quarterback and Tennessee was a playoff team. How many real playoff contenders are there around the country? 30? I don't know. I mean, 25, 30, somewhere like that. Within reason, that's probably about the number of teams that are somewhat. I mean, there's a lot of fringe contenders from maybe smaller leagues that you could say, okay, they're in there too. So 30, 35, that's the max, the absolute maximum. How many of those teams have quarterback uncertainty right now? And how many of those teams that do will pay more than Tennessee will pay? That's, I just, maybe the number's probably not 0, but it's not a large number. And it's certainly not a large enough number for those teams to start competing with each other and drive the thing up. Not even to the 4 million that he was talking about with Tennessee, like to the 2.4 or so that he makes now, or he's due to make this season. That's where I don't, unless the stars align, I don't see that being something that is feasible or probable, I should say. That's the unfortunate part here, is that, it takes some bravery to go out into the waters like this. You're betting on yourself, clearly, but you don't have the leverage now that you had back then, or the leverage that you would have had in January, frankly. So, I mean, because teams right now, not everybody's done with spring. I guess a couple people have a couple more weeks left, and so we'll see. Somebody could get hurt, something could happen, somebody else, I mean, maybe wherever, let's say Tennessee gets somebody from somewhere, right? And then that place has an opening, right? And if Tennessee wanted the quarterback who could fit into Tennessee's system, and that guy left somewhere, well, I could think of someone who could run a system like that, who could fill in the guy Tennessee just had, right? I mean, so that could work out. And maybe that's the best case scenario for Nico, frankly, is if Tennessee goes out there and gets a fairly big name and jumbles the market. I mean, that could start the dominoes that all of a sudden Nico wakes up one morning, hey, I'm back in it, baby. I mean, that could happen. So that's the best case scenario for him, maybe. And but going into a situation, Blake, I think when you take the entire Southeastern Conference and you basically take it out of the bidding war, out of the equation, you're really hampering the market. Like, you're kneecapping the market by doing that. You've got Big Ten teams maybe competing with each other financially, and that's about it.
Yeah, because what you're alluding to there, Wes, is the SEC rule that if you transfer in December, in that window, you can transfer from SEC to SEC. Within the conference, you can play immediately. But the conference, as you were referencing there, has that rule that if you transfer in April, like Nico is doing here, and you transfer to another SEC school, you have to sit out a year. You're not on the field this season. So as Wes was saying, his destinations, unless he wants to sit this year, is to go outside the SEC. So you're taking a lot of potential high bidders who maybe have the old cashola to get to the number that he wants. out of the picture, which is why I think it's safe to say for both Nico and for Tennessee, both parties would have been better off if this would have happened in December after Tennessee lost its first round playoff game. The window was open. The portal was open at that time after Tennessee lost its playoff game. If Nico would have come to the decision then that he wanted to test the transfer waters, I think that helps his market value, the demand for his value, and it also helps Tennessee get a new quarterback in there, practice in this system throughout the spring, and know who you got at this point, rather than kind of being in scramble mode. And really, I'm curious if you agree with this, Wes, or maybe you describe it differently. I consider this a lose-lose situation for player and school, and I realized I'm offering an opinion on that before the dust has settled. We don't know where Nico's going to wind up. We don't know who Tennessee's going to get. But I think for Tennessee to have to replace its starting quarterback in late April, that's not ideal. You're already through spring practice, and then for Nico to be in the situation he's in, that's also not ideal. I don't really. If I was betting that either party would have a better situation on the other side of this than if Nico and Tennessee were still a union right now, I think I would bet that neither party will come out of this in a better situation.
Yeah, I would put Tennessee at perhaps at best a coin flip to get better off of this than not. Maybe slightly less than a coin flip, but somewhere I think you're at least in the ballpark of being 50-50 ish on how well this turns out for Tennessee, as good or better or worse. I think with Nico, you have to take the finances into account with Nico. And if you're taking, because it clearly is part of the deal with them, it just clearly is. Going back to high school, the deals that they signed to now, like, it's been pretty clear. I'm not casting aspersions here. I'm saying that it's clearly finances are a priority to them, and hey, that's fine. That's their life. But I think Nico's chances of getting the deal that his camp wants at a place that's got a roster better than Tennessee's right now, I don't love those odds at all. And I think with Tennessee, it's interesting because with Tennessee, you go into the whole realm of, okay, exactly who's going to be in the portal. And because I can tell you right now, as someone who's covered a lot of Tennessee coaching searches over the years, Tennessee's one of those schools that you love it when there's a vacancy there. The market does, because a lot of people get raises based off of that. Like a lot of agents who are worth anything. I mean, I joked for years that, like, not just Mike Gundy, but like Jay Wright made so much more money based on the interest from Tennessee and hiring him at a couple different points. Like, he just made money constantly off of that. Like, hey, I think Tennessee's interested. You want to give me another couple million?
Yeah.
And so there will be, that's going to be the hard part with maybe misinformation, disinformation during the next couple weeks, probably, is that every agent who is worth anything is going to pretend that there has been dialogue with Tennessee and them about their player. And so there's going to be multiple quarterbacks getting raises based solely off of this, because Tennessee is going to enter this at or near the top of the food chain with what it has to offer financially and roster wise right now. And so you're going to hear and see a lot of names, and Tennessee absolutely will have been kicking the tires with some of them, but not probably all of them. And so that's what's going to make it, I'm not complaining. That's our jobs to figure it out. But that's where I'd like to see who really is interested in coming to Tennessee, because, so they could get somebody who could go in there, boom, 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 and you're good. Or they could get someone where you're like, I don't know about this. Is that better than what you had? Is that better than what you have now? Is that better than what's coming next season? So I it's really, really interesting, because I think we could be sitting here in 2 weeks talking about a Tennessee team that, this could be even better. Maybe they bring in a quarterback who's going to run more than Nico would, who I think in the Heupel system is a very valuable thing, right? Or they could be bringing in someone you're going, is that definitely better than Merklinger and McIntyre right now? And if that's the case,
Yeah.
Yeah, and if that's the case, then you're looking at, is this even a playoff contender now? So, I mean, you're talking about a whole menu. I'm thinking of one of those places like Cheesecake Factory where the menu's just comically large, and you're like,
Uh-huh.
how can you make this many things? You don't have the space and the manpower to make this many things at the snap of a finger. You're just putting this in a microwave, aren't you? There's you see that, and that's where you're going. Like, you can't do that much stuff. There's no way. That's how many things are on the menu right now.
I'm wondering if I was the only one who saw the irony in a kind of set of quotes from Josh Heupel's press conference after the spring game. So I thought, like, he won sort of the PR battle with his line of "No one's bigger than the power T." Like, that was something that really whipped Tennessee fans into a frenzy. They really liked that, and saying, like, we're kind of drawing a line and saying here, no one's bigger than the power T. But then he also says in his press conference, well, we're going to go out and have to get a transfer quarterback. Like, the irony of the situation is here, like, the ideal situation for Tennessee now is for someone else at another school to pull kind of a Nico situation and say, we think we might be a little better than our situation now, whether it be more money or for whatever reason, you think you're better than your current situation, and say, we think maybe the grass is greener on the other side. Oh, by the way, there's Tennessee over there that needs the starting quarterback. So I'm not really criticizing Heupel, because I think he helped kind of win the PR battle with his comments, but I did find it really interesting that he says no one's bigger than the power T. And oh, by the way, we need a transfer quarterback now. And what's left unsaid is what we really need is someone to kind of pull a Nico and be a pretty good quarterback who's a frontline starter, say, I'm going to hit the transfer market. I'm going to head over here to Tennessee.
Oh, I agree. And what's doubly interesting about that to me is not only did Heupel say that about the power T, he had the self-awareness to also say, including me, the coach,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not bigger than the program either, which, because a lot of people, if he didn't say that, would rightfully say, well, dude, you're making what, 10, 11 million? Like,
Right.
you might be bigger than the power T, right? But he said, no, I'm not either. No, and that part, that's good PR. And then the part that a lot of people tripped up on or didn't want to consider or just didn't consider is that, yes, they're going to turn a quarterback into Benedict Arnold and then go look for Benedict Arnold. I mean,
Yes.
that's what they're
Well
going to
said.
do. Like there's no, that's what's going to happen here, is that they're going to go look for someone who's going to be every bit as reviled in Knoxville as, in that his place as Nico is in Knoxville now. And so that's what you're doing. And then I guess going back to Heupel's comments, he also began his thing by saying, we all know the college football landscape's different now.
Mm-hmm.
And it just is. And this whole thing now, to talk about how different the landscape is now, if you're Tennessee, the conversations that you're having now are not just who would we like here. It's who would we like here and what does that person cost? And what that person costs. I mean, I'm telling you what, I don't know that it's exactly like this, but my guess is that they're looking at a whiteboard that says, okay, here's the 500,000 tier, here's the million tier, here's the 1.5 tier, here's the 2 tier, here's 2.5, here's 3, here's 4. And they got a list, and they know from agents that it's going to take this much to get these players. And then you're looking at it basically like an NFL general manager or a fantasy football manager saying, okay, this quarterback costs 3. Is he worth it to me at 3? Or would it be worth it if I can get this guy for 1 million, but then I can get these 2 receivers for 1 million each? And is that better than having this quarterback with the receivers I got now?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're doing. That's what this comes down to is, okay, I can get an all-world offensive tackle for 1.5 and a pretty good quarterback for 1.5, and that's 3 million. Or I can go get a no doubt nailed on tier 1 quarterback for 3 or 3.5. Which one am I going to go do? That's what you're doing now. I mean, this is transactional in every way now.
Yep.
And until they put contract parameters on it, I mean, you'd have to collect until they collectively bargain, which good luck with that many people to collectively bargain with that many people of that age from that many entities, that many conferences. Dude, you talk about legal fees whew, to get that put together. But yeah, that's what you're talking about now, is that sort of, that's why people have general managers now, for that reason.
Yeah, and the only thing I disagree with was with you and I, we'd probably have old school whiteboards with all this. Now it's probably in some like 4-dimensional spreadsheet with everything you're talking about with all the. But you're absolutely,
and you have to wear an Apple headset to like look into it, and it looks like a matrix.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. It becomes a numbers game as you try to piece this together now. How much is this guy worth? And if we spend this much on player X, that leaves this much on player Y, or do we just spend the bank on quarterback Z if you can get him? I'm wondering, some sort of, a lot of times kind of take the approach of bird in the hand's worth two in the bush, and I think in the case of Nico, the bird in the hand was probably worth whatever is in the bush over there, and I'm not sure it's a bird. It might be something looking out to kind of swallow him up. But in Tennessee situation, I also kind of said like maybe the bird in the hand was worth two in the bush here. But do you think, when push comes to shove, do you think Tennessee should have given Nico what he wanted, or do you think when kind of pushed into a corner a little bit, Tennessee played this in the best possible scenario, the best way possible given the situation?
Yeah, I think, and I won't cop out either. The cop out answer is we'll see.
Right.
We don't know, but yeah, I mean, that's not what we're asked to do. We're asked to guess on the front end, and I think I'm of the inclination that I am leaning toward thinking that Tennessee played this pretty well. I'll put it that way, because I think the problem is this goes back a ways here with this. And in this particular situation, there had been so much loyalty from Tennessee to that family. I mean, the only reason that he's maybe NCAA eligible is that Tennessee took the NCAA to court over his situation and prevented them from ruling him ineligible.
And if I can interject, Wes, also that further out empowered athletes. Like, that decision didn't just apply to Nico. That was a win for athlete empowerment. And I don't think it's a case of like just desserts for Tennessee. I mean, I think a lot of schools would have gone to bat in that situation, but it is like, to me, a kind of like, be careful of the monster that you helped create. That was a court ruling, a court settlement. That was a win for athlete empowerment.
Yeah, it was. And I think Tennessee and Tennessee's intentions in that weren't purely noble. They were existential on their end.
Yes.
They couldn't afford to have NCAA problems whatsoever then. So it was whatever it takes, win this case. And then that will leave another devil for tomorrow, but this is the devil here now. We got to fight this devil, and then we'll get to that devil later. But I think that, the issue with Tennessee is that there had been a group of players, like I'm sure at every other school, there's a group of players who were all in communication with each other, and they knew that they kept going back to Tennessee and getting more. And it was a group of guys, I'm not going to call them a cabal, but a group of kids and their agents who were a combination of current players and recruits. And they just at every turn kept going to Tennessee and getting more out of them. And then one of them would hear that the other one got more, so then they'd go back more. And they kept going back and milking this quite a bit. And I think Tennessee just eventually said that this cannot be sustained. Like, this cannot keep happening. And with one player, it's, a few thousand here or there. With Nico, it's a lot more money. And I think eventually they thought, you know what, we're going to have to lose most of these, but we can't lose every single one. And this is so much money. And there were even people saying, is he definitely worth what he makes right now,
Mm.
let alone what he's asking for. Is he worth that much money? And the answer is maybe, but maybe not. And that's at the rate he was being paid. So then when you're talking about that much money, I mean, and who's to say that they wouldn't even go try to make it more the next time? Like at some point, somebody somewhere had to say no, had to put the hand on the chest and say, slow down. And it was an interesting time to do it, but someone had to do it at some point. And Tennessee was like, this is the time to do it. Like, this is not, we're just not, this is becoming an amount of money that is a hinder to overall roster building in some ways. And is he worth this? And if we do this, are we just going to be in a couple months going through this exact same thing again? Are is this going to happen again? Like if this is a playoff team next season, like
Right.
are people going to go up there and before the playoff try to get more money out of you, or they're not going to play in the playoff game? Like, is all this stuff going to keep happening? And so they just reached a point where they were like, no, we're going to call bluff here, and we're going to hope that what happens is they hem and haw, and you pay him just another 100,000 or a couple 100,000, and then move on. And then it just didn't go that way.
And that may have been the ideal outcome if you throw a few more shekels at him, which in reality is maybe a couple 100,000 more shekels, but in the grand scheme of things, a few more
a rounding error.
A rounding error. But that's not the situation that unfolded. So so I was asked this question, Wes. Someone raised the point to me, like, well, Tennessee sort of just blew it with Nico from start to finish, and I'm going to kind of unwind this here, but give it away by saying I disagree with that notion, because the person I asked me this said, like, well, they commit all this resource to Nico, they get dragged into court, and in the end, the guy transfers and leaves them high and dry. Okay, true, that did happen. However, last season, they're in the college football playoff, the first year of the college football playoff with Nico as their starting quarterback. So, like, I was hesitant to say, like, this just went bust for Tennessee. Like, okay, yeah, maybe last week in the moment it did go bust for Tennessee, or we'll see who they get on the other side of this. Maybe it doesn't go bust for Tennessee. But on the whole, I'm kind of hesitant to say, like, this went bust for Tennessee, because it would have went bust for Tennessee if they went 6-6 last year and the guy absolutely stunk. But in his first year as a starter, you paid him what you paid him. You made the college football playoff with Nico as a redshirt freshman. Like, to me, I'm not ready to say, like, this whole thing was a bust. No, he transferred in the end. And so now that's the world we live in. You got to go out and find somebody else. But to me, it was, I don't know if I want to say it was still the juice was worth the squeeze, but they did get some juice out of it. It wasn't like they squeezed another game out. They were in the college football playoff last year with Nico as their starting quarterback, and that was some juice.
Yeah, I'm with you, and even more so, because I think the reason why it absolutely was worth it was because, well, you don't know what would have happened if you didn't do it, but you absolutely know what happened when you did. And not just that, there are secondary benefits to all this, benefits being a good word, I guess, in this situation, that how many players that were on Tennessee's roster were interested in Tennessee, or signed with Tennessee, or transferred to Tennessee because Nico was there and because you had a 5-star quarterback there? How many things like that elevate the entire status of a program? You start adding a 5-star quarterback, all of a sudden you are now in conversations with receivers and running backs and linemen and other people that you were not in before. And you're also, again, reminding people that, hey, you can come from California to Tennessee. Look, he's doing this. So you're opening up the entire map again, which Tennessee needs to kind of keep that's the grease they need in the engine. They need to keep the thing going, right? The oil. And so I think, yes, I mean, when you start getting into like the nitty gritty of, like, does X mean Y and this? No, like, what happened. And it happened, in Tennessee as a program went to a higher level. So to me, that makes just about anything that doesn't get you in trouble worth it. Because you've gotten there. You have proved to a new generation of players and their families that you can get to the playoff, that you can do this at Tennessee. Because people there for a while, it had been just long enough since Tennessee had done it before, been that relevant, that people were maybe fairly starting to say, I think wrongly, but fairly starting to think, can Tennessee do this again? Well, now that question's done. Tennessee can. It's not just winning in football, it's winning in all the sports now. Like, you can go there and win. And Nico was a part of proving that to people. So that's why I think, yeah, I mean, it did not end great, but it was worth it, I think.
Yeah, no, I think you convinced me there. I came into it thinking, I don't know if it was worth it, but you did get juice out of the squeeze. But yeah, I mean, I think you lay out a fair argument of not only did they get juice, it was worth the squeeze. And Nico will probably always be remembered as a pariah in East Tennessee. However, he will also be the first quarterback who took them to the college football playoff. So let's close on that, Wes, because we're talking about this in terms of transfer, and partly because Josh Heupel has said they're pursuing transfer to bring in here. However, there are still 2 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster. That's Jake Merklinger, who was in the program last year as a backup, navigated this spring as a backup, and then freshman George McIntyre. However, I think undeniably, if Jake Merklinger becomes the starting quarterback at the end of all this, Tennessee's playoff prospects decrease as compared to if Nico was the starting quarterback this upcoming season. And Jake Merklinger may not be the starting quarterback this season because of that transfer pursuit. But let's just play with the pieces we got here right now, Wes. Floor and ceiling. I'm wondering what you think the floor for this Tennessee season would have been with Nico as Tennessee's starting quarterback compared to the ceiling with Nico as quarterback, as compared to what would the floor and ceiling be for Tennessee this season if Jake Merklinger, the guy in the program right now, who would be the heir apparent if Tennessee doesn't get a transfer, what's the floor and ceiling with him as starting quarterback?
I mean, I think with Nico, you're probably, and again, I say this, I will qualify this by saying this spring I saw less football than I think I've ever seen in a spring, because basketball made a run again to the the another weekend of the tournament. Baseball was still doing.
Let's be real though, Wes. We don't see a lot in spring practice.
No, we don't. But we see some. We see some. Which during the fall we see nothing. So during the week. So, but what I'm saying is that's how I'll try to qualify that. But I think probably you're talking about with Nico maybe like an 8-4-ish floor, and a 10-2 or 11-1 ceiling. Probably that's just a guess, but that's, I mean, that's, I do think without Sampson, things could be more difficult anyway in some ways, because Nico's not someone who's going to want to run a lot. And if Sampson's not going to, then not going to be there, which obviously he won't, then you're going to have, that's going to change a lot of things. Like driver 6 was pretty special last season. A lot of the stuff he did was just out of this world. So, and with Merklinger, I've seen him really run the show for like a spring game. So maybe this is not fair, but I would say with him, you're talking like a 7-5 floor, probably something like that. And I don't know, 9-3 ceiling, if things go really well and you play good defense again and you find a running back situation that's good and your receivers make some plays for you. I tell you that Rodarius Jackson kid, if he goes out there and makes more one-handed catches like he did that one in the spring game, maybe okay, now I'm paying attention. You have my attention, young fella.
So I think what I'm hearing, Wes, is like in terms of win-loss record, maybe not a huge difference. Talking about floor 8-4 versus 7-5 versus ceiling, 10-2 or 11-1 versus 9-3. But it's the difference between being able to make the playoff and I mean 9-3. I don't think is getting you into the playoff.
No.
So I mean, to me, that's sort of the
some names can make it in at 9-3. Tennessee is not one of those names that would be in there at 9-3. I'll just tell you that straight off the bat. So let's just put that on the table and call that what it is and be honest.
Yeah. So for Tennessee to reinsert itself into the playoff contender preseason category, it needs a transfer.
Yes. I think in that it is okay to call a spade right there and say, listen, this is a team that is got some pieces. This is not a group of 5 roster we're talking about now. This is a good roster. They've recruited well here. They've got good players. But with the quarterbacks they have now, and again, that's what 8 to 9 stars worth of 2 quarterback prospects. Like, okay, they're not slaw, but it's different. And so, maybe someone could rise to the occasion. Maybe George McIntyre lights the world on fire. I mean, we've seen weirder things happen, right? Although that kid does look like he's about 6'7" and 82 pounds. So every time he gets a hit, I'm like, is he going to get up? I'm glad he's in a no contact jersey. I don't want to see him get hit ever. That would be painful. But, eat a sandwich, kid. But if they don't go get somebody that has some experience and has something to them, and if we're calling a spade here, which we should always be honest, someone that helps you keep your roster together. Because these guys that can all sit here and say, oh, I can't believe Nico left us. What a bad guy he is. And by the way, who's getting me the ball now? Because if nobody is, I'm leaving. I mean, that's the world we live in. You got to keep all these guys together. So you got to go get somebody who can do that and who can keep you at or around or above that same level. So, yeah, I mean, I would rather be Tennessee, I think, than Nico in the current market right now, given the situations facing both of them. But I don't know that I absolutely love either scenario. I mean, an optimistic person would say anytime you have an opening in your company, you can get better. In theory, right? Anytime you have a vacancy anywhere in your department, in your program, in your organization, you can, in theory, get better. But you're taking a chance and it's going to cost you money. So you got to go do that, though. I think if you're Tennessee, even if there's a chance, even if it's a total lie, you have to dispel the notion that you were cheap with Nico. Even if people pretty much know that's not the case, you need kids and their agents to know that was the case. You cannot have it be out there that maybe, because I think if Nico had been worth it, they knew he'd worth it, they'd have gone to $4 million. They absolutely would have. If he was going into the season as a Heisman candidate, a legit nailed on Heisman candidate, Tennessee be like, all right, yeah, name a price, man. We don't care. Let's get this done. That was the rub there. So I think if they get somebody who is around that caliber or a little bit below that, I think they would pay that person more than they paid Nico last season. If the right quarterback is there, I think they would have zero problem doing that. It's just, can you convince somebody to do that? Because again, you're bringing in somebody who will not have had a spring with you, which may not sound like much, but it does matter.
It does matter, particularly in that up-tempo offense that Josh Heupel runs. If you're not used to that type of tempo and boom, 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 boom decision-making, that can be tough to digest in 3 or 4 months. So
it's a very specific thing. It's not, most offenses are somewhat comparable to each other. This one, it's a group that's on its own island. It's only got the number of coaches offensively who coach this system, not small. I mean, not big. And they're very dedicated to what they do. There's a little subculture of them that run this kind of thing. And they're a little fraternity, basically. They're their own group. They don't share a lot of secrets. They don't want you filming their mesh points in practice. They don't want you talking about it at camps. Like, they are very specific and very intentional about what they do with this stuff. So you got to find someone who fits it.
Enjoyed the conversation. Again, you can find Wes's columns on the Nico developments at Tennessee, where Tennessee goes from here. You can find his columns on that over at GoVols247.com. He is the senior writer at GoVols247. You can find him on X at Wes Rucker 247. Wes, you don't have a very active X account, do you?
No, never. It's not at all the kind of thing where you look at how many times you posted over the years and been like, did I get paid for this?
But the man has opinions. You should go check him out, particularly check out his columns on the Nico situation over at GoVols247.com. Wes, enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for stopping by.
Anytime, Blake. You know that, man.
And thank you, listener, for checking out this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered. We'll be back with you next week.